Hi guys, welcome to my channel. Today, we'll dive into the sands of ancient Egypt to discover one of the greatest discoveries in history, the tomb of Tutankhamun. We'll relive the dramatic moment when Howard Carter opened the sealed door in the Valley of the Kings and saw wonderful things sparkling in the dark. But that's not all. We'll also explore the mystery of the so-called curse and the grim history of tomb robbers who hunted for gold under the scorching desert sun. We will follow another powerful force in ancient Egypt, the Scribes. They kept records, collected taxes, copied sacred writings, tracked harvests, and recorded events that still shape our understanding of ancient Egypt today. The day the world stood still, the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb. The Valley of the Kings lay silent under the scorching Egyptian sun in the autumn of 1922. For centuries, this arid stretch of land near Luxor had been the final resting place of Egypt's mightiest rulers. Most tombs had been plundered long ago, their treasures scattered across the ancient world. Archaeologists had scoured the valley for decades, convinced that nothing significant remained to be found. But one man refused to give up hope: Howard Carter. Howard Carter was not an aristocratic scholar like many of his peers. Born in Kensington, London, in 1874, he was the son of a struggling artist. He began his career as a teenage artist himself, sketching artifacts for archaeologists. Over the years, he earned a reputation for meticulous work, though his blunt manner often clashed with Egypt's elite and his wealthy British backers. By 1914, Carter was financially backed by Lord Carnarvon, a wealthy English aristocrat with a passion for Egyptology. Carnarvon funded Carter's excavations in the Valley of the Kings. However, after several disappointing seasons, Carnarvon's patience wore thin. By 1922, he gave Carter one final season to produce results, or their partnership would end. Carter's hunch was based on fragments of evidence. He believed a minor pharaoh of the 18th dynasty, one virtually unknown to history, was still buried somewhere in the valley. The name? Tutankhamun. Carter's belief stemmed from a cache of funerary goods with Tutankhamun's name found in the tomb of I, a later pharaoh. Workmen's huts built over an area near the tomb of Ramses VI, suggesting they had concealed something beneath them. If Carter was wrong, his career would collapse. If he was right, it could be the greatest discovery in archaeological history. At dawn on November 4th, Carter's team of Egyptian workers began clearing away the last debris from the site he had long suspected. That morning, one boy discovered something unusual: a carved stone step, partially buried beneath the rubble. Carter's heart pounded as they unearthed more steps, revealing a staircase descending into the earth. At the bottom lay a sealed doorway, plastered and stamped with the official necropolis seal, a sign that it had remained untouched for over 3,000 years. Overwhelmed with excitement, Carter sent a telegram to Lord Carnarvon in England. "At last have made wonderful discovery in valley, a magnificent tomb with seals intact. recovered same for your arrival. Congratulations. 3 weeks later, Lord Carnarvon arrived with his daughter, Lady Evelyn Herbert. Together, they descended the steps to the doorway. With trembling hands, Carter made a small breach in the plaster seal and held up a candle. As his eyes adjusted to the flickering light, he saw a dazzling array of objects, statues, gilded furniture, and strange shapes shrouded in linen. Carnarvon, barely able to contain himself, asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter's famous reply entered the annals of history. Yes, wonderful things. This was just the outermost chamber, known as the antechamber. It was so crammed with treasures that it took several months to catalog and clear the space carefully. Among the treasures were ceremonial beds shaped like sacred animals, golden chariots, and exquisitely carved statues of Tutankhamun as a guardian of his tomb. Behind the antechamber stood another sealed doorway. On February 16, 1923, Carter and his team finally broke through, revealing the burial chamber itself. Here lay Tutankhamun's nested shrines and coffins, culminating in the solid gold sarcophagus and the now iconic death mask that would become the face of ancient Egypt. The burial chamber's walls were adorned with vivid paintings depicting Tutankhamun's journey to the afterlife. However, Carter noted that some paintings appeared hastily done, supporting the theory of a rushed burial. News of the discovery spread like wildfire. Newspapers across the globe carried front-page stories of the boy king. Crowds flocked to museums and exhibitions, and a wave of Egyptomania swept the Western world. Ancient Egyptian motifs began appearing in fashion, architecture, and cinema. But amid the excitement, a darker story emerged: the legend of the Curse of the Pharaohs. On April 5, 1923, just weeks after entering the burial chamber, Lord Carnarvon died suddenly in Cairo from blood poisoning caused by an infected mosquito bite. Newspapers sensationalized his death, linking it to a supposed inscription found in the tomb: "Death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king." In reality, no such inscription existed. However, a series of subsequent deaths among individuals associated with the dig, some coincidental, others from natural causes, fueled the legend. Even Arthur Conan Doyle, creator of Sherlock Holmes, claimed the deaths were caused by elementals guarding the tomb. Howard Carter himself, the man who had first opened the tomb, lived another 17 years, eventually dying peacefully in 1939. A strong counterpoint to the curse myth. The excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb lasted a full decade, meticulously documented by Carter and his team. In total, over 5,000 objects were cataloged, including Tutankhamun's iconic golden funerary mask, weighing 22 pounds, jewelry, weapons, and clothing offering insights into royal life, 2 small mummified fetuses, believed to be the stillborn daughters of Tutankhamun and his wife, Ankhesenamun, a meteoric iron dagger forged from a meteorite that had fallen to Earth. Carter's discovery revolutionized Egyptology. It provided a pristine snapshot of a pharaoh's burial, unlooted and undisturbed, something never before seen by modern archaeologists. The artifacts, now housed in the Grand Egyptian Museum, continue to captivate millions. For 3,200 years, Tutankhamun's name had been nearly erased from history. His reign was short, his political achievements modest, and his successors had sought to forget him. Yet through Carter's perseverance and a twist of fate, the young king achieved immortality. As Carter himself reflected, it is the dream of every archaeologist to bring to light the history of a forgotten people. Tutankhamun's tomb was not just a discovery. It was a time capsule of a vanished civilization. To this day, the golden mask of Tutankhamun remains one of the most recognizable artifacts on Earth, a silent witness to both the glory of ancient Egypt and the extraordinary story of its rediscovery. Tutankhamun's reign was short and politically modest, yet his tomb transformed him into one of history's most famous figures. Modern science continues to study his remains and artifacts, unraveling new details. DNA studies have confirmed his lineage and diseases. CT scans have reconstructed his face and body, showing a fragile young man rather than the robust warrior depicted in ancient art. Theories persist about whether hidden chambers may exist behind the tomb's walls, possibly connected to Nefertiti, though radar scans remain inconclusive. Though erased from memory by his successors, Tutankhamun's legacy has endured through the accident of history. His tomb, untouched by grave robbers, has given modern humans a priceless window into the world of ancient Egypt, its splendor, its rituals, and its mysteries. The boy who died too young now lives forever, his golden mask shining as a symbol of both the fragility of life and the eternal power of history. Tomb raiders and curses. The black market of the afterlife. The Valley of the Kings, under the shimmering Egyptian sun, was meant to be the eternal resting place of pharaohs and their closest kin. For the rulers of Egypt's new kingdom, 1550 to 1070 before Common Era, monumental tombs carved deep into limestone cliffs were designed not only as burial chambers, but as spiritual fortresses. Painted with scenes from the Book of the Dead, stocked with treasure and provisions, these tombs were gateways to immortality. Yet from the moment the first sarcophagus was sealed, the dead were never safe. As gold gleamed in the torchlight of burial ceremonies, it also beckoned to the living. The same wealth meant to sustain a pharaoh's soul in the afterlife tempted the poor, the desperate, and the corrupt. Tomb raiding was not merely a crime. It was a betrayal of divine order, an assault on the very foundation of Egyptian belief. For Egyptians, disturbing the dead was thought to unleash chaos, bringing misfortune not only to the thief, but to the entire community. This fear gave rise to the earliest stories of curses, warnings inscribed on tomb walls to terrify would-be intruders. One chilling inscription found on a Middle Kingdom tomb at Saqqara read, "As for anyone who shall do evil to this tomb, the crocodile shall be against him in water, the snake against him on land." Despite such threats, history would prove that gold outweighed fear. Archaeological evidence reveals that tomb raiding began almost immediately after the first royal burials. In fact, many tombs show signs of intrusion within decades of their completion. The reasons were both economic and political. By the late 20th dynasty, circa 1100 before Common Era, Egypt was in decline. The state was bankrupt, soldiers went unpaid, and food shortages spread. Ordinary laborers, once employed to build tombs, now face starvation. Tombs, filled with gold, silver, and rare resins, became irresistible targets. An extraordinary ancient document, known as the Abbot Papyrus, now housed in the British Museum, gives a first-hand account of this crisis. Written around 1110 before Common Era, it records investigations into tomb robberies during the reign of Pharaoh Ramses IX. The papyrus describes raids on the tombs of nobles and even pharaohs, corrupt officials who either ignored the crimes or took bribes to look the other way. Detailed confessions of thieves, including how they melted down gold to sell on the black market. One testimony reads, "We found the noble mummy of this king, and we took the gold which was around his neck, and the amulets and ornaments which were upon him." This chilling account shows how organized and systematic ancient tomb raiding had become, a far cry from lone robbers sneaking in by night. Whole networks of thieves, officials, and merchants profited from stripping the dead, while physical defenses like hidden passageways and false chambers were common. The Egyptians also relied on psychological warfare, curses. Curses were often inscribed on doorways or burial goods, warning that divine retribution awaited intruders. Many invoked the wrath of gods like Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead. One 4,000-year-old inscription reads, "Cursed be those who disturb the rest of a pharaoh. They that shall break the seal of this tomb shall meet death by disease, and swift destruction shall find them." Whether these curses were believed by thieves is uncertain. Most raiders were practical men who understood that the real danger came not from spirits, but from the law or rival gangs. However, the idea of the curse would outlive the ancient Egyptians. Centuries later, when European explorers uncovered these tombs, sensationalist journalists and occult enthusiasts revived the notion that pharaohs struck back from beyond the grave. The most famous example, of course, was the so-called Curse of King Tutankhamun, popularized after the sudden death of Lord Carnarvon in 1923. Though modern historians agree this was mere coincidence. As centuries passed, the plundering of Egypt's tombs shifted from survival-driven theft to a global black market for antiquities. When Egypt fell under Roman rule, 30 before Common Era onward, tomb raiding became semi-legal. Roman elites prized mummies and sarcophagi as exotic collectibles. Mummified remains were even ground into powder for use in medicines, a practice that horrifies modern sensibilities. In the Islamic medieval era, ancient tombs were often mined for building materials. Limestone blocks from pyramids were reused in mosques and homes. Papyrus scrolls and wooden artifacts were burned for fuel. Though less romantic than tales of treasure, these acts further devastated Egypt's ancient heritage. The most catastrophic wave of looting came during the 19th century, when European colonial powers turned Egypt into a hunting ground for antiquities. The spark was Napoleon Bonaparte's Egyptian campaign from 1798 to 1801. Napoleon's scholars meticulously documented ancient monuments, igniting a frenzy of interest back in Europe. Soon, wealthy collectors and museums competed to acquire Egyptian relics, no matter the cost. Figures like Giovanni Battista Belzoni, a former circus strongman turned explorer, became infamous for their exploits. Belzoni used explosives and brute force to open tombs in the Valley of the Kings. He transported massive statues, like the bust of Ramses II, to the British Museum. His methods caused irreparable damage to delicate tomb paintings and artifacts. During this period, mummies were sold on open markets in Cairo like common goods. Wealthy Victorians hosted mummy unwrapping parties, where guests watched ancient remains dissected for entertainment. Countless treasures were smuggled out of Egypt, many ending up in private collections across Europe and America. By the late 19th century, outrage over rampant looting gave rise to the first attempts at scientific archaeology. Scholars like Flinders Petrie emphasized careful excavation and documentation rather than treasure hunting. The Egyptian government, under increasing pressure, passed its first antiquities laws. In 1835, Muhammad Ali Pasha banned the export of antiquities, though enforcement was weak. In 1858, the Egyptian Antiquities Service was founded to protect heritage, led by Auguste Mariette. By the early 20th century, stricter regulations began to slow the flood of stolen artifacts. Still, the black market thrived. Even Howard Carter, who discovered Tutankhamun's tomb, operated in a world where foreign expeditions often kept a share of artifacts for their sponsors. Looting did not end with the advent of modern archaeology. Today, the black market for Egyptian artifacts remains a multi-million-dollar industry. During Egypt's 2011 revolution, widespread unrest led to a surge in tomb robberies. The Egyptian Museum in Cairo was broken into, with several priceless artifacts stolen. Remote archaeological sites were left unguarded, making them easy targets for organized gangs. Interpol and UNESCO now track the illegal trade in antiquities, but enforcement remains difficult. Stolen items are often laundered through international art markets, appearing in the collections of wealthy buyers who may not even know they are purchasing stolen goods. Even in modern times, the myth of the curse continues to fascinate. While historians dismiss supernatural explanations, the psychological impact of curses remains real. Archaeologists entering tombs today often report a palpable sense of reverence and unease, knowing they are treading in spaces meant to be sealed forever. In 2019, when Egypt moved Tutankhamun's golden coffin for restoration, crowds gathered nervously, some whispering about the curse. The connection between ancient fear and modern fascination remains unbroken. The story of tomb raiding is not just one of greed and destruction, it is also a story of resilience. Thanks to the efforts of archaeologists, historians, and the Egyptian people, much of the country's heritage has been preserved against overwhelming odds. The tombs of Egypt were meant to safeguard the souls of the dead on their journey to the afterlife. Ironically, their desecration has given the world a priceless window into a vanished civilization. Yet every artifact stolen, every mummy destroyed, is a reminder of what has been lost to the black market of the afterlife. As archaeologist Kent Weeks once said, "We are fighting a war against time, greed, and indifference." These tombs are the last voices of a great civilization. If we do not protect them, their voices will fall silent forever. Why you wouldn't survive as a scribe on the Nile. Faded ink, oppressive deadlines, and paper cuts. The Nile River has been called the lifeblood of ancient Egypt, its seasonal floods giving rise to one of the most advanced civilizations in human history. While towering pyramids, golden sarcophagi, and monumental statues often steal the spotlight, the true power of Egypt didn't rest solely on its pharaohs or priests. It rested on the shoulders of a far less glamorous class, the scribes. At first glance, being a scribe might sound like an enviable profession. You were literate in a world where fewer than 1% of people could read or write. You worked closely with the elite, avoided back-breaking labor in the fields, and enjoyed a level of social prestige. But if you imagine yourself sitting beneath a palm tree, elegantly writing with a reed pen while the Nile breeze cools your skin, think again. Life as a scribe was grueling, stressful, and often downright dangerous. Between faded ink, oppressive deadlines, and constant paper cuts, you probably wouldn't last a single flood season. In ancient Egypt, writing was more than a skill. It was a sacred act. The Egyptians believed that words had magical power, and writing was considered a gift from Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and knowledge. Because of this divine connection, scribes were not simply bureaucrats. They were seen as intermediaries between humans and the gods. Scribes were indispensable to every aspect of Egyptian society: government, recording taxes, census data, and decrees; temples, copying sacred texts and keeping ritual calendars; army, tracking troop numbers, supplies, and victories; agriculture, calculating crop yields and storage quotas after the Nile flood. An ancient text known as the Satire of the Trades, circa 2000 before Common Era, tells of a teacher named Keti who tries to convince his son Pepi to become a scribe. He paints other professions as miserable: brickmakers covered in mud, fishermen reeking of the river, farmers beaten by overseers. The scribe, by contrast, commands and is not commanded. But like many recruitment speeches throughout history, Keti left out some unpleasant truths. Becoming a scribe required years of intense education, usually starting at a young age. Most scribes were boys from relatively privileged families, though there are rare records of women scribes, especially in temple settings. Education took place in a house of life, often attached to a temple or palace. Students sat cross-legged on the floor, practicing hieroglyphs on broken pottery shards, ostraka, or wooden writing boards. Lessons were repetitive and punishing. A famous Middle Kingdom text, The Instructions of Keti, describes the typical training. The back of a youth has ears, and he listens when he is beaten. Mistakes weren't tolerated. A slip of the reed pen could turn a word into nonsense or even blasphemy. One poorly written tax receipt could send a farmer into rebellion or land a scribe in prison. Even after years of training, mastering the three main Egyptian scripts, hieroglyphic, hieratic, and later demotic, was daunting. Hieroglyphs alone had over 700 symbols, some representing sounds, others whole ideas. Hieratic, the cursive form used for day-to-day documents, required speed and precision. Writing fast while maintaining legibility was an art form in itself. Every scribe carried a writing kit, a wooden palette holding red and black inks, a set of reed pens, and a water pot for mixing pigment. Papyrus, Egypt's signature writing surface, was made by slicing the stalks of the papyrus plant into thin strips, soaking them, and pressing them together. While lightweight and durable, papyrus was also expensive. Dropping ink on a fresh sheet could ruin hours of work and your supervisor's temper. Ink, black ink, was made from soot mixed with water and gum arabic, while red ink came from powdered ochre. Red was used for headings, names of gods, and important corrections. In the scorching Egyptian sun, ink could dry out mid-sentence, forcing scribes to constantly stop and re-wet their pens. Reed pens. These were stiff, sharp, and prone to splintering. Long writing sessions meant blisters, calluses, and the occasional painful paper cut. A small injury, but potentially dangerous in a world without antiseptics. Archaeologists have discovered ancient scribes' palettes in tombs, such as the beautifully carved palette of Sekhmet, now housed in the British Museum. These tools were status symbols as much as practical instruments, reflecting the scribe's elite position. Imagine it's the peak of the agricultural season. The Nile has just receded, leaving behind fertile black soil. Villagers are harvesting wheat, barley, and flax, while tax collectors, accompanied by armed guards, descend upon the countryside. Who records every bushel, every jug of beer, every goat tithe? You, the scribe. Fail to report accurately, and you'll face punishment from your superiors. Report too accurately, and angry villagers may turn on you. A papyrus, known as the Wilbur Papyrus, around 1147 before Common Era, details tax assessments for farmland, revealing how meticulously scribes tracked even the smallest holdings. The deadlines were brutal. Pharaohs demanded up-to-date records for everything, from temple donations to military campaigns. During times of political turmoil, like the late New Kingdom, scribes worked day and night to keep pace with shifting alliances and orders. Mistakes weren't merely embarrassing, they could be fatal. A misplaced hieratic mark could change the meaning of a royal decree, leading to treason accusations. For this reason, scribes often worked in teams, checking and rechecking each other's work under candlelight.